This is Outtrigger, an arcade first-person shooter in the mold of Quake 3, which starts out with this snazzy, James Bond-inspired introduction. Yes, we rescue every kind of innocent people. You don't actually rescue anybody in this game, you just shoot them. But yeah, I always thought that was kind of a hilarious sentence. Anyway, let's dive into the game. This is the Versus mode where you choose a level and duel it out. And I have this in 4-player mode with 3 CPU players. Start! So it's your basic FPS game, kill them before they kill you. And one thing you might have noticed, though, is that you can look very rapidly, and that's because Outtrigger supports the Dreamcast mouse and the keyboard, which is great because it gives you that kind of accuracy which you don't get in most console FPS games. In fact, Outtrigger has a lot of control options. I'm playing this with a mouse in my right hand, with the sensitivity dialed all the way up, and then a Dreamcast controller in my left hand using the D-pad to move my guy around. And it's kind of interesting too in that it's a made-for-arcade FPS game. At the time in the early 2000s, most FPSs were made for computers, so, you had ports of Quake 3 or Unreal Tournament for the Dreamcast and PS2, and they didn't really move very well. They had a choppy frame rate, but because Outtrigger was made from the ground up for arcade hardware, it actually moves at 60 frames a second, even in split screen mode. The character models are also pretty good. They're a little bit anime-ish. And in contrast to PC games at the time that were really gothy, this game has really bright colors and textures, and the textures are fairly high resolution too. It all looks pretty striking. Outtrigger also has a few unique twists on the genre. You might have noticed that the enemies drop coins when they're vanquished. You get 1 point for getting a coin and 1 point for offing an enemy. So you can steal other players' coins for extra points, and you can't camp, because if you camp, then other players get your coins and cost you a point. And I like that because you can use coins as bait, and it forces players out into the open. There's also a number of power-ups, from bouncing shots to flamethrowers, glasses that let you see through walls, night amp vision, all kinds of stuff to pick up. There's even a quad damage. The game also has several characters to choose from, each with their own abilities, and it has a few other arcadey touches like the ability to shoot down rockets in mid-flight. In case you're wondering, the machine gun is best for that. That's mostly a defensive weapon in this game. And yeah, the game also takes a lot from Quake 3, like I mentioned, the quad damage wannabe power-up. There's also rocket jumping. So yeah, it's essentially Quake 3 with an arcade vibe. But honestly, I have more fun with this one. Now for the bad points of the game. The AI really isn't very good, and in fact, on one of my favorite levels, I can't even play with AI because all they do is jump into the lava like lemmings. Did anyone test this thing? Many of the arenas are also far too small for more than 2 players. For instance, this one, which is basically a room, and that's not unusual in Outtrigger. A lot of the arenas are very tiny. Fortunately, the arenas which are large are quite well designed. I just wish there were more of them. The game also has 2 play modes other than Versus, such as this mission mode here. Unfortunately, they're both rather dull. Mission mode is probably the more offensive of the two, with a variety of different goals which are all equally boring, such as collecting medals or evading shots. Yeah, this is really fun. Arcade mode is a bit better, where you have to defeat so many enemies within the time limit, and each one drops a time icon which boosts your time by 5 seconds, and the clock's quickly counting down. This mode can be pretty intense, but neither mode is nearly as fun as the traditional versus deathmatch mode. But they do add some variety to the game, and playing mission mode unlocks new arenas to battle in. The real downfall of Outtrigger is that there's no way of playing 4-player with mouse control, which is needed for this game. You really can't hack it with the controller. It's so aiming-centric like Quake 3 is. Back in the day, it supported online play via the internet, but servers are long gone now. It's a real shame that Outtrigger doesn't support the Dreamcast link cable, because if it did, you'd be able to still play 4-player with mouse control. Now there's absolutely no way of doing that. But speaking of mouse aim, you know, that stuff was born in the arcades. The first deathmatch-centric game with mouse aiming I can think of is Gunbusters from 1993, and that's a Taito arcade game where you moved forward, back, and strafed with the joystick, and you aimed and looked around with a mounted gun on the cabinet. So if you're interested at all in arcade FPS games, check out Gunbusters. It's way ahead of its time.
3, 2, 1. Start!
But getting back to the topic at hand, I really dig the soundtrack in Outtrigger. It's quite atypical for a FPS game. It's jazzy, funky James Bond kind of tunes. So that's Outtrigger. It does a lot right, and also does quite a bit wrong as well. I'd say that if you have 2 Dreamcast mice and 2 people that want to play Outtrigger, go ahead and pick it up. It's not all that expensive. But if you want a good single-player FPS game, or one with good 4-player action, this isn't it. And even then, I don't think it's going to tear you away from Halo or Splatoon or something. Nevertheless, it's a nice, bright, and colorful FPS diversion.
Result. Outtrigger.